yes, we have made strides in creating funds and putting money and dollars towards starting to invest in women, but 0.1% of all venture capital goes to women of color. Let's talk about why women of color are being left out of that story completely.
That was Nathalie Molina Nino, founder of Brava Investments. I'm Lucy Norris, and this is Views from the Top. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Nathalie to talk all about tech empowerment, shocking statistics, and what we can do if we want to shape the world in which we live in. Nathalie shared with us her experience as a young entrepreneur and the advantages that she's had as a woman in tech in the 90s compared to females today who are working in the exact same space. So what were some of the challenges that you came up against as a female in the tech industry?
In the early 90s, and then leading into sort of mid to late 90s, you still had a lot of women engineers. We had double the number of women graduating in engineering in the 80s than we do now. So this problem of the lack of women in tech is very real. I definitely spent my career being the only Latina for miles. And apart from being lonely, I think it happens that you have few reference points and you have few mentors who have experienced what you've experienced. Not having those sort of mentors, people that had done it before, not having a frame of reference of other women founders in tech to learn from is tough. It's super tough. And what ends up happening is, certainly this happened to me in my youth, I felt the need to look at the models that men were outlining or showing by example and feeling like I had to top them, right? I had to be better, it had to be perfect. If they were tough, I had to be tougher. And what it created was a really tough persona, right? One that in the early 2000s I finally realized was not me. A couple of people have called it my monster boss years.
As we discussed the pressures that come with being a leader, Nathalie opened up about her monster boss years, as she calls them, and how this attitude changed with time as she wanted to be a better leader and have a different approach to her profession. What did you learn from those monster boss years, though? What were some of the things that you did take and move forwards with?
I learned that the principles of who I was as a human being growing up don't shift when you're in a management position, don't shift when you suddenly have thousands of people reporting to you in an organization. You fundamentally have to remain true to that sort of nucleus of who you are, and that is going to be the principal thing that influences your management style. It should be, not the frame of reference, not what you see around you. I grew up being taught to be kind. And I grew up being taught to be accountable and basic things about how to be a human being. And in becoming a manager, I lost sight of some of those things. And I think that was the biggest lesson for me is, at the end of the day, managing people is just being human and maybe doing it a little more effectively.
Nathalie spoke about what she thought was missing in the industry when it came to investing in women and how she chooses the companies that impact women based on her own sense of urgency. So what was missing in the industry that you felt Brava Investments could move forwards and fulfill and offer a solution to?
The metaphor that I've been using that I think is helpful is, if you think about attacking the problem of a disease, right? Let's say a cancer, right? You have people who are on the front lines, who are dealing it on a micro level, so that oncologist that deals one by one with people with cancer, right? And then you have the person who's dealing with it at a macro level, who's maybe sitting at the UN or sitting at one of these global organizations, looking at it from a global perspective. Right. What I found was missing in the industry around investing in women, everyone in the space felt like they were focusing on that surgical micro level. This is how we attack the problem. And what I kept doing is I kept seeing that at a macro level, when we look at the problem globally, there wasn't anybody looking at it from that perspective. Right. And the result, and I think it's really important for all of us in the industry of investing in women, we have to stop and look at the unintended consequences of our work.
She went into depth on how there has been a lot of optics over the last few years and how she really defines what it means to make an impact. How would you describe what it means to make a purposeful, meaningful investment?
Part of why we created Brava is to redefine that. We are now at a point of inflection and maybe even a point of maturity in the space of investing and then making an impact as well. There's been a lot of optics. There have been a lot of things that appear to be making an impact, but you look under the surface and not so much, right? There's also been a lot of variation on what impact means. I worry about ETFs that purport to support women, for example, but the only criteria is that you have X number of women on the boards. But I want to take the resources that we have and the influence that we have and the amazing people that we have at the table to make catalytic impact. So it has to be the kind of company that can scale and ultimately be able to make hundreds of thousands and maybe even millions of women economically independent. If they can do that, then I know that I'm making an impact.
If you want to contact Nathalie to find out more about Brava Investments, this is how you do it. So that's all for today. Next week, join us for a new passion and a new climb to the top. Follow us on social media for more behind the scenes and extra insight. I'm your host, Lucy Norris, and you've been watching Views from the Top.